welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I am one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 3, Episode 6, The Abandoned. Before we continue, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
Absolutely, and as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are a great time. And tonight, for the first time ever, we are live. So if you decide to join us or whatever that is, you are going to see our bright, smiling faces. If for whatever reason you don't catch the live broadcast, you can of course join us on our new face or YouTube page as the Fire Caves as well. Everything will be immediately streamed, loaded to the Facebook to the
YouTube
YouTube
page.
page, and then you can watch us and tell us what you think and all the other kind of stuff. And so don't worry about it if you don't get it this time, but we still would like to hear from you whenever you can.
And then we'll still upload to the other streaming services
Correct. So you will
later
still
on.
have your regular ability to listen to the podcast wherever it is you listen to podcasts. I do it on Spotify. I think David, you said you do it on Apple through Apple Podcasts.
That's right. Yep.
Right. So whatever platform it is that you normally listen to us on, you can still do that. The release of this, however, will be on Friday, October 7th. So you can either listen to us live now. You can get the YouTube version here in about an hour or so, and then you can hear it again on your podcast platform. So lots of different ways that you get to enjoy us. But before we
Boom,
get
baby.
into yeah, right. But before we get into all of that, since this is our first live broadcast, David, anything you want to say on this auspicious occasion?
Oh, well, I guess welcome. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully I'll get better lighting. I got this dark shadow over here. But yeah, I definitely would like to get some better lighting and maybe even a better camera in the future and jump up a notch. But it's fun to test out live streaming for the first time, get that going, and I hope people will be able to join us live here in the future.
We did have some views of our test run that we did yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for people who may be looking for it later on. I deleted it because I didn't like it. But while it was up, there were a number of views that we had for it. But again, that was not supposed to be a true episode. We were just testing things out, so you didn't miss anything. If you get curious and are wondering about it, you're missing out by not seeing it. But yeah, so I mean, hopefully we can continue to gain some more traction. Um, what have you been up to this week so far?
Well, our last episode, at the end of our last episode, you and I were talking, and you told me that you recently got the first book in the Expanse series, and so I
Yes,
ordered them today so that I can read them with you. We could do like
yes.
a side thing to talk about. So I ordered the books off Amazon, got all 9, just got the whole
You went and
collection.
got all 9.
I was like, I'm gonna
You
go
jerk.
for it. If I'm gonna
You
start, I
jerk.
might as well commit. So I'll get the whole thing. Um, and yeah, they arrive on Tuesday apparently. So
Mm,
hopefully you and I can read those together. We could give feedback on how the Expanse books are compared to the show, as an addition to some Deep Space Nine
yeah.
content.
So if you are new to the Fire Cave, which I'm assuming you won't be, um, as you can tell, we're pretty much, sci-fi nerds in every way.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about a bunch of different shows, and we'll continue to talk about a bunch of different shows in addition to Deep Space Nine, and really how Deep Space Nine kind of, in my opinion, and I guess I'm trying to convince David of this opinion, Deep Space Nine kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of shows that came, later throughout the 2000s and so forth, for like great sci-fi television. The Expanse being one of the more recent ones that we're quite enamored with right now.
Oh
So,
yeah.
the show, I guess it didn't recently end. I guess it's been off the air for about a year now,
It'd be
maybe
about a year, I
2.
would say. I
Yeah,
think when we were starting the show about a year ago, we were finishing up the last season,
right,
season 6 on Amazon.
right.
Yeah, so it's been about a year.
So, we know that the show is based off of a book series. I debated for a long time as to whether or not I was actually going to read the book series. And then finally, my mother actually, I guess she got tired of listening to me go on about the show, she was able to actually find the very first book in the series. I've looked for it in different places, but could never really find it. And as I said to David recently when we were talking, anytime I looked, I only ever saw the complete set. I never saw like you could just order one and then go from there. It was always you had to get all of them. And I guess I just have commitment issues. I just couldn't do it. I just wanted the one.
Right.
So I finally got it, got my hands on it thanks to my mother. I do appreciate that. And I've just started reading. I'm like, I just got through the prologue only. I'm not very deep into it at all. So yeah, that's going to be our new thing that we will also be um, incorporating into the show as we incorporate so many other things between other TV shows to just 90s trivia and culture and things you should know from the 90s that were going on around the time that that Deep Space Nine was out and popular and so forth, and just moving through it that way. So yeah, just be on the lookout for all those things, I guess.
Cool.
Now, before we do get into the episode, there is at least two different bits of housekeeping I feel like we got to do. One is to acknowledge our own anniversary, which we did not do when we actually had the anniversary. We were kind of, I guess, saving this live broadcast to it. As David indicated a little bit ago, we've been doing the Fire Caves now for about a year. We're into the third season of the show, but we've been doing this podcast now for about a year.
Hmm.
And I think our first episode was September, what? I think September 10th.
Something like that. Yep.
Yeah, because
It's been
yeah,
a month and a year and a month almost at this point.
yeah.
For us to acknowledge it. So I guess it
But see,
just kind of
there's
came and like you don't think about it. So it's like, oh my gosh, there it went.
well,
That
so
was
well,
the
I
anniversary.
thought about it. I thought about it, and I realized what the problem was when we were trying to set this up and start it initially. We were trying to get everything to fit into Star Trek Week. And Star Trek Week is always a pretty big fanfare thing with, they do panels and there's movies and there's just all kinds of stuff. And we were new and trying to be a part of that stuff. Well, then this year, when Star Trek Week rolled around, it was kind of that, but there was more because now, one, we had a podcast that was in full go. We had all of the new stuff that they were doing to allow people to like attend virtual panels and stuff because despite what some people may think about COVID, it is still out there affecting a lot of people. And so a lot of things were virtual this year. And so we were kind of doing some of that. And then, of course, we had, the passing of Nichelle Nichols. And then, of course, the passing of the Queen, which kind of, there was just a lot of things happening all to the same week that we were trying to pay attention to. And so, of course, you can't get to everything. We also
Right.
had the in memoriam stuff, not just for the passing of Nichelle, but also celebrating Aaron Eisenberg, who played Nog, his passing. And then, of course, we had Louise Fletcher, Kai Wynn here just recently. So just a lot of things that didn't necessarily say, hey, celebrate an anniversary,
Right.
like not in that particular sense. So we'll try to be better about it next year, I think. But yeah, I think that that's just all that happened. But yeah, it's been great doing this for a year. I've enjoyed talking about one of my favorite shows ever
Yeah.
with you, and dragging you along and hoping that you'll get to the point where you're just as enthusiastic about this show as I am.
Right. Right. Yeah. Actually, this episode will I'll have some comments to make about uh,
Oh,
why Cisco is it again just comparing him to Picard.
oh yeah,
Why is he different? How is he different? What does that mean? Um, yeah.
absolutely. And speaking of Commander Cisco, today is his birthday. He
Avery
is
Brooks.
74 years old. Avery Brooks, the actor who plays
Wow.
Commander, later Captain Cisco, is 74 years old today. So, of course, happy birthday to Avery Brooks, the most badass captain that we've ever seen in Trek so far. Now, granted, there are some other captains that their shows are running right now, so they haven't had the chance to be, to prove their mettle, I guess I'll say, just yet. But who knows if they'll get there or not. But I still think Avery is the one to beat on that level.
Right.
We've got the diplomat, we've got the scientist, but he is definitely my, kind of the just he's gritty, he's edgy, he's funny. And I haven't seen anybody that can really surpass him just yet. So we'll see. And it's only fitting that it's also his birthday, and we're talking about him so much in this episode because this is also one of the few episodes that Avery Brooks directed. So we're going to get a
Oh,
lot of Avery
really?
Brooks tonight, guys. Yeah,
Very
yeah. This
good.
is
Wow.
He directed a total of 9 episodes of Deep Space Nine, and this is one of them. So we are
This is
right
number
on it.
2 of the 9.
I think so because I think he directed one back in season 2.
I think he
Um, I-
directed the one where they went to the alternate universe, right? Where Kira was the. Was that
that's
the
right.
one?
That's right. He did
We were
direct
talking
that
about
one.
that. Yeah,
Yes,
because
he did direct that
the
one.
the alternate Captain
And
Cisco was like a pirateer type
yeah,
character.
and he was barely in the episode, which made sense because Avery was pulling double duty there. So he was probably
He wasn't pulling
step
double
back.
duty here. He was definitely in the
No.
episode. Yeah.
Now there is a reason for that. Avery Brooks felt that the story told here, both the A and B story, were very important, not just to the character of Cisco, but also to kind of speaking again to that prevalence in the '90s of drug culture and the aggressive way that drugs kind of influenced black people, brown peoples, and urban youth in general in the '90s. And
Okay.
so he felt that it was very important to tell a story that was about kind of redirecting that hostility, that aggressiveness, and so forth,
Right.
and showing how there are there are ways in which you can be different, but then also how like it can seem inescapable. So again, we're going to get into that, of course, with the episode, and kind of delving more into that because that's what we do here, and that's why we love this show so much. But yeah, would you like to
Cool.
would you like to give our recap?
I can, unless you feel like you should. I don't know. I'd be happy to do it.
Either way, it's fine. As we say, we're just hitting the highlights here. We're not going to give you a point for point on the episode. I mean, again, the show is 30 years old. If you want that, go watch it. In fact, you should go watch it, then join us. I mean, I guess you can't do that now because we're live, so you should have watched it before. But I'm just saying, yeah, just give us the high points, and then we'll take them through it anyway.
Okay. All right. All right. So this episode starts off in Quarks, where one of the Dabo girls, Marta, helps get money for Quarks by convincing one of the players who was on a winning streak to go one more time, and he loses that last time. And then when he goes to try and approach her, she brushes him away because she is Jake's girlfriend. And she sits down with
Yes.
Jake, and we get a brief moment of them looking lovey-dovey to each other. Quark is approached by a captain of a ship. Oh, I think we've seen her before.
Yes.
This captain says
She's
that
the Boslick captain. We've seen her before. This is the second time, and we will see her again.
I don't doubt it.
Time. But if there's one recurring theme with her, it's every time she shows up, she brings Quark a little bit of trouble.
Oh,
So,
I didn't. Yep. Yeah. The first time I think was when she brought in season 2, episode 1. She brought the message saying that there was a Bajoran captives. I believe is that correct? From
That's right.
Season
That there
1
were
or season 2, episode 1.
Bajorans still being held on a prison camp.
Right, and that she had the earring of one of the people, which turned out to be Lee Nollis's. Yeah. Anyway, so that's her. She shows up and she says, "Hey, Quark, you know me. We've been doing business for a long time. I got some business for you. I got some salvage from the Gamma Quadrant." And she convinces him to pay up front before seeing the goods. And so when Quark goes to view what he has bought, of course, it's a bunch of junk, except that he starts hearing a crying baby. And he opens up a stasis chamber, and we move into the end of the opener. When we come back, we're in the infirmary, and Quark has given this baby to Dr. Bashir and Cisco. The infant has a very high metabolism rate, and so Bashir is thinking that this creature must be artificially designed on some level because it seems like its genetic structure seems to have been manipulated. They try and find the Boslick captain, but of course she's disappeared. So we're going to have to figure out what to do with this kid. Cisco has a lovely moment with the child holding him, and Dax sees that, and she says, that it must remind you of, when you had, Jake, and Cisco says, I miss when Jake was young and being able to care for him. And it's revealed, Cisco goes back to his quarters and tells Jake that, oh, I invited your girlfriend, the Dabo girl, Marta, to dinner, and Jake is upset. He heard, his dad had said that he wanted to invite her, but that seemed to be more of a thing that maybe he had forgotten about, and so Jake is feeling, a bit, nervous about his dad meeting this Dabo girl, and in the conversation that Cisco had with Dax, actually I think it's with O'Brien, Cisco tells O'Brien that, him dating a Dabo girl isn't such a great thing. He does have some problems with that, and so he's gonna find a way to make them break up. It won't be quite too heavy-handed, but he'll find a way to kind of work it out. However, in the meantime, the baby, as we said, has a high metabolism, and the next day, the child has grown into what looks like an 8 or 9-year-old. And as Bashir and Cisco are talking, the child is able to understand them and able to communicate back with them right away. So this is concerning. Where did this child come from? This definitely seems to show that the child is artificial in its origin, especially because Bashir has done some more testing. And so they're worried about this child. What are they going to do with it? Let's see here. Now, O'Brien has found that the stasis chamber seems to have been designed to forestall the baby's maturation while aboard the ship. So the ship seems to have been some sort of transport. So this just further backs up the idea that this child was artificially designed and created. Let's see here. So Kira, this is a third thing going on. Kira goes to Odo. Odo has some new quarters, and he's initially resistant to let her in with her plant. She has a plant of like a house decorating. Here you go. This is for you. But he does let her in, and it's a strange room because, of course, he doesn't need to sleep, and he has a bunch of strange objects in there. But Kira's excited to see it all, and he explains that he wants this room to be a place where he can test his shape-shifting abilities, different textures and shapes and all sorts of things. And Kira really, really likes it. And apparently he doesn't need to go into his bucket anymore. He can just, go on the ground as he has his own private area. He can just
kind of relax and be himself. Right.
Exactly. Bashir and Dax, they realize that the boy is missing an enzyme. There's something about his genetic structure that won't produce this enzyme, and so that again further gives them the idea that this child is artificially created. And this means that if they can find this enzyme, they'd be able to help the boy, because the boy, as we find out at the end of this part, is that he is now a full-on teenager, and he is a Jim Hadar. He has the full-on facial plates, the hair. If we recognize the Jim Hadar from any previous episodes, that is what this boy is. And so if we remember, the Jim Hadar were the military wing from the Founders, and the Founders were the changelings that Odo was. And so when the boy is running out, he runs into Odo, and Odo lets him pass through him, and the boy immediately seems to recognize Odo as something to be in awe of. So this is important because if we have a Jim Hadar child here, he's dangerous. So now Cisco is having to talk with Starfleet. What do we do about this Jim Hadar? Well, they want to take him. The Federation wants to take the boy to Starbase 201 to research him. Now, Odo objects to this. He was a specimen, treated like a science project for many years. He didn't like that. He doesn't like the idea of this boy being treated the same way. So he objects to this boy being treated as a science project. So he decides to ask Cisco if he can take responsibility for the Jim Hadar boy, saying that, as a changeling, he automatically has the artificial creation of this boy has put something into him to respect changelings. He is a changeling, so therefore he should be able to control the boy. At the same time, they're able to find the uh, enzyme in amongst the wreckage. The enzyme they need to give the boy, they're able to find, and that enables the boy to, not experience the nausea and pain of missing the enzyme. This is very good, but of course the Jem'Hadar boy doesn't like being treated like a specimen either. So Odo starts taking control of the situation and starts working with the Jem'Hadar boy. Cisco and Jake have Marta over, and Cisco thinks he's going to be in control of the situation, but he actually starts learning some things. Marta, tells about her personal history, and Jake says, "Oh, you're a great writer." And she says, "Oh, no, I'm not a great writer. You're a great, you write great poems." And Cisco's like, "What? You write poems?" And so Jake is very happy with Marta there. They almost kiss at one point, which was awkward. And Cisco is basically not quite so ready to just kick Marta out and put his foot down with Jake. It turns out that Jake is also quite the Jom-Dot hustler, it turns out. So,
Jom-Dot.
Yeah,
Dom-Jot. It's Dom-Jot.
Excuse me. Cisco is learning all kinds of things about his son from Marta, it turns out, and that is both good and bad, but he decides to kind of let it roll. So Odo is now taking control of the boy, which we don't ever get a name for him. He's just the Jem'Hadar boy. And he wants to, fight. He is designed to fight. He's a fighter. So Odo takes him to one of the
Quark's holodecks, yeah.
And
lets him kind of duke it out for a bit
with one of the hollow projections. And the boy keeps wanting the danger turned up. And so by the end, I mean, it's way up there. And this boy is already a skilled fighter, like just automatically a skilled fighter. Meanwhile, while the boy is learning to fight, Odo is pulled out by Kira, and Kira berates him, quite frankly, and tells him, "What are you doing? This boy is dangerous. He's not we gotta be very cautious with him. We need to make sure that we remember that he's a Jem'Hadar, and that we shouldn't treat him as a toy, basically. Can you trust him?" She asks him. And Odo says he's not trying to control the boy. He's trying to give the Jem'Hadar boy a third option, a specimen in a laboratory, or another just Jem'Hadar, and be violent. But it turns out that Cisco can't stop the Federation from wanting to take the boy. They want him to go to the station because they're concerned about the Jem'Hadar and how dangerous they are. So Odo decides that he is going to take the boy and make a run for it. That he doesn't want the boy, hurt. So, but the Jem'Hadar boy actually steps out of camouflage and points a phaser at Cisco, and he basically forces Cisco to let him go. Now, of course, Cisco, being in control of the station, tells O'Brien and the others to make sure that they can't leave. But when they confront Odo and the boy, Odo makes a case for returning him back to the Gamma Quadrant, and so Cisco allows them to leave, claiming that, I'll use the excuse of you guys overpowered us. So that's what happens, and then shortly thereafter, Odo comes back to the station and tells Kira, "You were right about the boy." And that ends the episode. I know there's some more things that we'll probably get a chance to talk about, but I feel like those are the major highlights. So anything you'd want to add?
No, I mean, I think you essentially hit the high points. We're going to get into it, of course.
Right.
But yeah, one of the first things that I want to talk about is Quark not following the rules of acquisition, as Cisco points out to him when it's revealed that he just kind of took this salvage sight unseen, and Cisco's like, "Aren't there rules about this sort of thing?" And he's like, "Yes, I normally follow." He's basically just intimating that the Boslick captain got the better of him using her feminine wiles, basically.
I was gonna say, yeah, it seems to be insinuated that she gave him another reason.
That he bought the salvage from her on the cheap, and got landed with yet another issue that
Right.
she's put in his lap. So, I mean, if anything, he should just learn to stay away from her. But as we all know, that is not Quark's MO whenever it comes to a beautiful woman. So, yeah, he's going to definitely be thrown to the wayside there. And then
Right. Well, I just
I
want to
also
quickly say
like,
before you move on,
yeah,
I just want to say that I feel like Cisco if he's in control of the station, shouldn't he also know what's coming on to his station? Shouldn't he know that this wreckage and this stasis chamber might have ended up on the station? But
well, I mean, I
I
think
don't
for
know.
all intents and purposes, they're trying to turn Deep Space Nine from a place of oppression into a place of community and commerce. Because, as we know, under the Cardassian control, the space station was a deuterium processing facility. It was not a pleasant place to live or do business. It was basically a labor camp in space.
Right.
And so now they're trying to make it something else. And I think Cisco's job is more just like, let's just make sure things go smoothly. He's not trying to necessarily interfere with their business. And it also explains why he's so annoyed with Quark a bit, because everybody, all the different races that come on board the station and do their business and whatever else, Quark is the only one who continuously finds himself mixed up in something that goes well beyond trade, commerce, whatever. There's always some greater implication behind whatever he gets involved with. Like, she traded him the earring, and that led them to Linus and the Circle, and almost toppling the entire Bajoran provisional government, all
Yeah.
because of Quark and his inability to say no to this woman. So it's
Yep.
just like, stop it, man. You're getting us all in trouble. We're all tired of you bringing
Yeah.
us stuff. And then here he comes with this baby, which seems so, innocent enough. But then, of course, it's a adolescent Jem'Hadar, you
Right.
know. So yeah, he's a troublemaker, to say the least. He's a troublemaker, So it's just, I love that. And
Hmm.
then I also love that there seems to be, and even though we I don't think we ever hear more of them, but there seems to be rules in regards to um, Dabo and the Dabo girls. Marta tells Jake, rule number one of Dabo: watch the wheel, not the girl.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I love that there's kind of these little subsets of rules and like cultural things that pop up here and there.
Right.
I wish we could get more of that, but hey, I'll take what we can get. You know,
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
and then of
Speaking
course,
of the, oh, go ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, then we have Marta and Jake.
Yeah.
Um, wow,
Marta and Jake.
Marta and Jake.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about them a lot tonight. Marta and Jake.
Oh, okay, good. Because
Man,
man, I was like, yeah, I'm with Cisco on this one. What the heck is a? I mean, she says she's 20, but I'm like, this actress seems a little older than 20.
hey,
She's all but making out with a 16-year-old boy. Like, what's going on?
so yeah, one, it's the '90s, so people looked. I'm not gonna say that people looked older then than whatever, but I believed her when they said that she was 20 years old. I also did draw a little bit of a pause when I found out that Jake was 16, and I was like, you landed a 20-year-old at 16? Like, how is that even
Yeah,
possible? But
right.
you know what? I give them a pass for a couple of different reasons. So are we ready to go ahead and jump into the Jake and Marta discussion now?
I guess we're doing it.
I guess so. All right. So, a couple of things I feel like you must remember in order to kind of appease yourself a bit.
Right.
One, this is the future. So, I mean, that helps a lot. It's a future show, whatever. But beyond that, if we strip away all of the uh, techie stuff or whatever about it, what do we find out about Marta? One, her parents were killed when she was a child. She was raised by neighbors through the occupation. She does
Right.
have a brother and sister, but they don't get along. So we know already her personal life, her family life in particular, is a shambles, to say the least. Okay. So you're
Right.
dealing with a deeply affected, most likely traumatized individual who's been trying for a very, very long time to establish a life, a living of some kind, right?
Right.
And then we don't know what the cultural mores for Bajorans and age and dating and all that other kind of stuff is. Not to
Okay.
say, I'm not to say that there's a bunch of people who are like, you know, 30 dating 16-year-olds or whatever that is. I'm not saying any of that happens, but you know, in our culture,
Right.
you are considered an adult at 18. That is
Right.
not always the case in other cultures. There's plenty of other instances in other cultures where people are deemed men or deemed women at different ages. Okay.
Right.
So we
Right.
can't sit there and say that just because ours says this one thing that is the end all be all. Second,
I did some pushback there, but go ahead. Keep going.
that's fine. That's fine. But I'm just saying, for in this instance, 16 is not too far outside of the range of being considered an adult for some. Okay. Um, Now, the next thing is, if you also want to go to the route of thinking about what we know about, again, Bajorans and Dabo girls, and whatever, which is very little, I would think that the appeal of Jake to someone like her is that he offers her um, a lot of compassion and understanding that she might not otherwise get. As we see when we first encounter Marta here, this is the first time we've actually really seen Marta. She was
Right.
mentioned in season
Right.
2, but this is the first time we've ever seen her.
True.
She's objectified 100%. Even Quark does it, her boss, he's got her in the skimpy outfit and everything like that, because her job is to distract the
Right.
people playing Dabo.
Right.
So she's objectified in the extreme. The guy that she's just convinced to deal away his money, he is instantly trying to push himself on her, and she has to deflect that. And I'm sure that's not the only time she's ever had to do that, you know. And then she sees and interacts with Jake Cisco, who doesn't do any of these things. As far as we can tell, Jake is a very upstanding um, young man. He's very considerate. He's very kind. He's probably in no way like the men she's used to throwing attention at her.
Right.
So I think he offers her something that she really hasn't experienced with any other type of man before. So between the again not understanding the age thing, and then the trauma of the past and all the other stuff, I feel like while it would still make us a bit uneasy, I think we could work ourselves towards giving them a pass a bit more than if this was just two humans, one being 20 and one being 16, and so forth. A lot of
Right.
things we don't know culturally is what I'm saying. So
Okay. So first off, I want to say that according to the age, the age of the actress, apparently she was actually 18 or so when this was filmed. So I was wrong. I thought she seemed older than that, but whatever. For me, it was. I still feel like Jake is a boy, and she came off the whole time as a woman, and so it just felt awkward because it's like he's still a boy in my mind. Like,
well, and
why
again,
is a
that's a pure example of her upbringing. As she says, like, her parents were killed a long time ago. She had
right?
to grow up a lot faster than he did. Yes, he lost his mother, but he had his father, and his father also, as much as I love Cisco, he can be a bit overprotective of his son. And so it's easy to
No,
frame, oh,
what?
yeah, right, right. So it's easy to frame him into that mindset of still seeming boyish, because his dad is so, he's so invested in Jake, and he's so into, listening and paying attention to his son, and doing things with him, that kind of constantly reminds us that he is a boy, you know.
Right.
But we are also watching Jake grow up. Jake is not the same. I mean, we're this again. This is season
Oh, he's
3.
so tall.
He's You're
Oh
right.
my
He is certainly
goodness.
not the same from what we saw of him in season 1. In season 1, he was
Yeah.
so unsure of himself. He definitely leaned on his father a lot more. And now, he's more articulate. He's much taller. He's definitely come into his own a bit. So
Right.
yeah, there's more to him here that we're seeing as he's entering into his mid-teens, coming
Right.
into his adulthood. So again, I see the potential of this, but I also like that Cisco was like, she's a Dabo girl and she's dating my son.
Right.
I'm not gonna like her. So it was great, great moment. I fully identified, like, it's one of those things, like I've said before. I remember watching the show when I was younger and it was on, and being like jealous of Jake. And now I'm on the other side of it as a father, and I'm older, and I'm like, yeah, my daughter's not dating till she's 30, so I don't want to hear
Right.
it. So
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Again, I thought the actress was older than she actually was, apparently. So that was, I guess, part of my concern was like it. Like, there's that scene in the at the dinner scene when, like, Cisco's out of the room, and so they're like up close and they nearly kiss. It's just,
Oh, I
so,
get it. So you were thinking of it of like this actress who is.
oh no,
You
I
were
felt
thinking
like
she
the
was just too old for
show.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, the actress, the character. Let me put it this way. Yeah, I'm holding the Dabo girl bit against her, frankly. I mean,
Okay.
her job is to get dolled up and distract men with her looks, and she does her job well.
Yes. That
She
doesn't mean
doesn't.
that she goes any further and does other things. She just,
Fair enough.
fulfills the role of the 9 to 5.
Let
But
me put it
because
this
she's
way.
dressed
Let
as
me
a
put it
woman
this
of
way.
ill repute.
I can imagine that most people would agree that your high school relationships didn't work out, right? And so I just feel like poor Jake being kind of lonely on the station. He found a girl. She likes him. We don't know her well enough yet. I mean, the dinner scene does give us a chance to know her a little bit more. But I guess what I'm getting at is that right now it just seems like she's. Let me put it this way: she's the type of girl, as a Dabo girl, who is worldly wise. And if Jake isn't also worldly wise, he could be taken advantage of.
Well,
I'm concerned for him being taken advantage of, frankly.
okay.
If
Well, but
not
that
because, if only because he's the son of the station captain, commander, and
yeah.
so if she just needs a way to like protect herself by getting in with the son of the station commander, she doesn't actually like him. She's just using him for protection. That's part of my concern. She's
Okay.
just using him.
So your
So
concern is that she could be using him. All right.
yes,
I mean, I guess that's fair, but at the same time, I would say we have no evidence that she's done anything like that. If anything, it seems like she's drawn Jake out a bit, and we learn more about Jake because of her. Even Cisco says so. We didn't know about the poetry writing, Domjot hustling son that was apparently,
yeah.
wise beyond his years, basically.
One of the last lines
You
of the
know,
episode before Odo shows up and talks to Kira, he's talking to O'Brien and he says, "Do you ever play Jomdot or Domjot?" He says, "No." Or maybe it's Dax he's talking to. But I
no,
think it's
it's
O'Brien.
O'Brien. He goes, "Have you ever played Jake? Have you ever played Domjot with,
Jake,
yeah,
and
with Jake?" And he's like, "No," and he's like,
no,
"Don't."
don't.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, I guess
it's
that's
a, it's
another thing. It's like, is she teaching him how to, you know,
well,
not
we
steal
again,
exactly, but play games of chance and take advantage of his opponents? I mean,
I'm gonna say if anybody is teaching Jake how to play games of chance and gambling and everything else, it's got to
it's
be Nog.
Nog. Yeah,
It's
it's fair
Nog.
enough.
He
Well, she
picked
ain't
that up
there.
from them.
She's helping. I'm sure they all three play together, and they've
That's,
all
I
taught
mean,
each other a thing or two.
I'm sure that's probably how they met. He was hanging out in Quarks with Nog, playing Domjot, and there she is working as a Dabo girl. And then he also says that he was helping her, he was helping her study and stuff too. So maybe on her break, she was trying to study something. He knew it, came over, laid down the knowledge, and before you knew it, they were, something else was going on there.
Right.
you know and again, I think that's another way that she, that we can see that she's getting something from him that she's never really had the chance to experience before. In most cases, men in her, that came into her profession for whatever reason, they all looked at her in one very narrow, particular sexualized way. Jake didn't. And being able to relate to him on a level that did not involve her being a glorified game girl or whatever you want to call her, and that she didn't have to be, dressed in tight whatever and all makeup and all that other kind of stuff, and just got to be a person. I think that's another thing that let her, another reason that
Well, I
kept
guess
her interest in him.
Well, I guess that my question is too is like, I mean, we've seen them together with her dressed up like that, and if he met her at Quarks, then that's certainly the first impression he got of her. And then secondly, what was
We
the second point? Shoot.
we don't know,
Uh,
how they met. We don't know how we're making a lot of inferences here because we never see it. We
right.
never see how they met. It seems like I'm more on the making it as innocent as possible. You, on the other hand, are like, nope, she was spinning more than that wheel, and that's what got his attention. So,
Yeah, I just, I mean, a little bit wrong. If they work out, great. I hope they do. I guess. Oh, I think this is the other thing is, why doesn't she already have other friends that she can get, affirmation from outside of work? Does she not have female friends or male friends a little closer to her age? I mean, that is a 4 year age gap between them, which at those ages is actually pretty big. I mean,
Well, I
at least
mean,
in our culture, that's college age versus sophomore in high school. So,
yeah, but there's nothing to indicate that she ever really went to any of those things. Again, I keep going back to her, what she
no,
said about her
I'm
life.
not saying that she did. I'm just saying that the comparison to us that we would make. I mean, the 4 year difference is massive at that young age. Like you and I are about 4 years difference. So in our 30s, it doesn't matter as much. But for late teens, I feel like it would
Well,
matter a little bit more. So
yeah, but I mean, there could be reasons. Like, I mean, she clearly had to work early in order to support herself. She didn't have
right,
a family base to do that, or even
right.
friends really to do that. It seems like her whole existence has really been about survival. Her parents were killed. She lived with neighbors briefly to take care of herself through the occupation and maybe a little bit post occupation. But then, everybody on Bajor is starving. Everybody needs the ability to take care of themselves. And she found a way quickly because she was young, because she's attractive, and the Ferengi pay. Like you can say whatever you want to say about them, but they do pay. So at least it was a quick, probably the only way really because I mean, without any formal training or anything. I mean, what were the Cardassians were in control of their planet? What were they really going to train them as a skill set to do? They weren't training them to, be, starship captains or shuttle pilots. They were a labor force to them. So suddenly that all goes away. There's no, I mean, as crappy and oppressive as it was still some kind of structure. All of that suddenly goes away. You have no way to make any kind of income or to do anything, and you have no training, even if you wanted to. This is all she had, and it paid. Sucks, yes, but it paid. So I'm still going to give her a pass. So I mean, we never lived those kinds of lives, David. We don't know what that's like to have to survive after a alien invasion force in your
I
home.
just well, I just want to be clear. Like I'm not saying that. Yeah, like if she had to take care of herself, I get it. My point is that does that make her a good companion for Jake? And my initial reaction is no. I mean,
Well, I
by the
mean,
end of the
we don't
episode, they're
know
making
the
the case that they are compatible. So I will give the
well,
show that.
and they're
That's
also
one.
making the case that a person is not just a job.
Oh,
That's the
yeah, I
other
know.
thing too. But I mean, I'm just going one step further and just saying just because she had a troubled, traumatic past doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only type of life that she's going to lead, and that's the only thing she can contribute to someone else's life either.
I
She
guess
could
what
very
I
well be a
I
very
guess what I would I'm just because what I'm like behind in the back of my head, what I want, what I'm kind of getting at is like I I find it sad that Jake doesn't have girls just a little bit closer to his age and experience to date. Like the Dabo girl is the. I mean, maybe there are other girls, and he just that's who ended up with. To be fair, like the show doesn't have time to
okay.
give us the Jake life, and it doesn't usually focus on Jake. But it feels like as the only boy of the humanoid race on the station, and there aren't many Bajoran characters that we interact with, and she's the first one, but she's a Dabo girl, not like one of the girls in his class, for example.
I got you.
Nog was the only one that he really became friends with. So I guess I'm just sad for Jake. I feel like his choices are slim, and so the
Yeah,
one girl he is actually in a relationship with is one with some. We have some
experience.
questions. We're like, okay, is she really like, what do we
I
know
understand.
about her? So yeah, we've
I
talked
see
a
what you.
lot about this. Dear
So
God, we spent
yeah,
at
no.
least 15 minutes.
Well, all I'm gonna say to wrap that up is one, you're right. We have not seen everything when it comes to Jake's dating experience, and just as a mild spoiler for you, as a person who's never seen Deep Space Nine, stay tuned. There's more to
Okay,
come. Okay, so
gotcha,
there.
gotcha.
So yeah, we need to put this to bed because we've now like really went maybe too far into this. But that's what happens whenever we talk about the Ciscos in general. We enjoy that family dynamic so much, and we literally are watching it change. Like every season, there's a little bit of a different aspect of it that we're coming into. And now
Right.
here we are. We went from Cisco being a widow, dealing with a adolescent son, to now he is you know on the verge of fighting with a fully formed man here. His son is 16. There's a
Yeah.
complete difference here from 9 to 16. So we've got a big jump that we've seen.
Right.
Um, but yeah, a great bit, and also just to kind of bring us to our favorite part of Cisco versus Picard. I feel like Picard would have been completely out of his element here. I don't think he
Oh,
ever would have
exactly.
been able to handle this kind of a situation
Not at all.
whatsoever.
And that is actually even more true in the moment when Cisco picks up the baby Jem'Hadar boy. That moment where
Yes.
he lovingly picks up this child who he doesn't know anything about and is sweet and caring and reminisces about his own son and how much he loves his own son. Picard was always portrayed as someone who was awkward around kids and who is kind of cold he's a military man, so there's a chain of command. He does things a certain way. Cisco always comes off as more passionate in both the loving, willing to express affection type ways, and in the hot-headedness as well. So there are goods and bads of both personalities. But this is definitely an example of how Cisco differs, and
Yeah.
it's to his benefit in a lot of ways, that he is
Yeah.
that warm character. We can have these moments, these scenes. Picard would have never picked up the child
Not at
and
all. I
lovingly
think
held
that
him. Yeah,
no, I think that if Picard had encountered an alien child in this pod or whatever, he never would have handled the child. He never would have held it. He certainly would have
right,
been way more standoffish, and he would have been way more apprehensive. He would have already been thinking about the potential dangers and repercussions of the child. It would have been along the lines of, you know, who are its parents? We need to identify this race quickly as possible. Are they friendly? Are they hostile? Is this kid carrying anything that could hurt anybody? Let's keep them isolated. We would have heard more from Dr. Crusher and Counselor Troy in this one, talking
yes,
about we need to, like it's a baby. It's a child. We need to treat him as such. And Picard, and then especially once the child like aged up rapidly, Picard would have been like, oh no, 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 no. This He would have been so suspicious the whole time, and it would only be well after the fact that after the child left the ship that Picard would have relaxed, and then we would have gotten
yes,
some kind of waxing poetic or whatever about the
right,
situation in general and the potential to change an enemy to a friend or whatever. That's what we would have heard from Picard. He would not have been hands-on or active at all the way that Cisco was.
right,
Cisco was totally enamored with the kid when he was holding the baby. He wasn't thinking about threats or dangers or contagions or anything like that. He was reminiscing. He was thinking about the last time he held his son and how much he loved it and how much he missed it. And even when Dax tries to remind him of the terrible parts of being a parent with an infant, he's still like, yeah, I still miss it. I miss all of that. So we
right.
get to. I feel like it definitely makes Cisco more relatable than Picard because it's just more. I think it just feels more human that he misses being a parent like that, especially
Yeah,
now that his son is so much older and bigger. And then we get to see that in the very next scene when he goes home and he tries to hug his son, and Jake's like, nope,
yeah,
turns away from him and stuff.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah. He was very cold in that first moment when Cisco
yeah,
comes in. Yeah,
hurt his dad's feelings,
yeah,
not wanting to hug the old man.
yeah,
So, but yeah, Picard would not have handled this situation well at all. He's never handled children well. So
yeah,
that is a very great uh, distinction between the two of them, and we see it so well here. And Avery Brooks just makes it look 100% natural. Like he just really, I would believe it if someone told me that he really enjoyed being a parent, a father, and so I would absolutely believe. I mean, we have nothing to say that he doesn't. I'm just saying, if someone
right.
came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, this man, great dad, great granddad," I'd be like, "Yeah, I know. I watched him 30 years ago hold a baby. I believe him. I believe him." So,
Yeah.
but now let's talk about one of our other favorite characters, Odo.
Mhm.
Odo, when we get to see some true growth here with him moving from his small bucket to now he's got full on quarters that he gets to morph around in.
Right.
Um, I was surprised seeing that. I mean, I guess I never really thought about it. Odo having
Of
quarters on the
course.
station, but of course
I,
he should.
I would assumed he did. Yeah, I know it was until season two's episode 2 when Kira was told that she had been promoted back to the planet that we get that hilarious scene where everyone comes to her
Oh
quarters
yeah.
and is starting to say goodbye. That was the first time we saw her quarters. But yeah, I always assumed that Odo had quarters of his own. I know we had a bucket and that he primarily was found in the office of the
The security
jail.
office.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I just always assumed that he just kept the bucket in there and that he just stayed in the office.
Yeah, and that seems to be what was implied. And now that I think about it, like that's kind of what I was in the back of my mind assuming on some level. Like that was also his private space, or at the very least that he spent most of his time there. And if he did have his own quarters, it was bare, and he only went there briefly to regenerate and came back immediately. Like he didn't even furnish it. So to find that he has new quarters and that he's furnished it was interesting. And when Kira first shows up with the plant, he's all sighing heavily and he's like, ugh, okay, if you really want to come see it. But then like when she's in there, he's like actually excited to tell her about it.
Yeah, like when the door closes behind him, he completely relaxes and he's so excited and eager to tell her about what his goal is with his quarters. It actually like I loved what he said about it just kind of being like his own personal sanctuary, a place for him to just kind of
Right.
explore and everything like that. It actually made
Yeah.
me kind of jealous. I was like, you know what? I kind of should do that at my own home. Like I feel like my
Yeah.
own house should be like my place that's it's for me. It's indicative of my likes and my interests, and it's my place to kind of relax. And it's not just a glorified storage bin. It's make it yours, make it your home.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
yeah, it's
I
like
I love. I guess I haven't really mentioned it, but yeah, I moved recently. One thing I could have talked about. I moved recently, and I have my own room, and it's bigger than the room I had before. And yeah, I definitely have made it more of mine, which has been great. Um, yeah, so I
yeah.
feel for Odo because at the beginning of the season we had him meet the changelings, and this episode really ties into those episodes.
hmm
The
What he learned, you're right.
Jem'Hadar
Like what he learned on when he was on the home world, on his home
right,
world, and then they were encouraging him to explore and shapeshift. And now
right,
he's back on the station, but he instead of I guess living in the disappointment of discovering they were the founders, he's taken some of what he's learned and he's now incorporating that into his home life. He
right,
has a place now. He's making it his own now. He's exploring his culture through shapeshifting.
right. The
Yeah.
only question I have, maybe you can answer this or not, but in season 1 and in other scenes when we've seen him shapeshift, other than him having difficulty with the humanoid face, he always seems successfully able to transform into whatever he wants to transform into. Part of me is
Well,
like, I mean, I
if you think about it, we don't really see him turn into a lot of things. He kind of half
true.
forms tendrils, and he's able to, like, he whipped his arm that one time, and then he
Well,
was, of course, the
actually,
big amorphous blob. The
well,
one,
actually, in season 1, the one thing I'm really thinking about, there's that episode where he goes to the Gamma Quadrant with that captive who tells him that I know the changelings, and it turns out he was lying about having met changelings. Yeah, it was the vault was actually his daughter in cryostasis. He
yeah.
tells the story. Anyway, but in that episode, when we first start, Quark is taking a bunch of
Oh,
drinks, or
that's
I guess
right. And
it's Rom
he's
who's
one of
taking
the
the drinks.
glasses. He's one of the
Exactly,
glasses.
and he like even remember you remember I talked about it. It's like when he shattered, Odo shattered when the glass was thrown. He shattered, and I thought that was
Yeah.
strange because that meant that he could like his body parts could like separate from each
Blow
other
apart, right?
as glass. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that maybe that's a simple enough object for him to have done it.
Yeah.
And then he's just practicing more options. Like when he was on the Changeling planet, he turned into a bird and it was like expressing how awesome it is to be a bird. And I also think it's also an idea that it's maybe not expressly said, but if he's always been kind of ashamed of his changelingness and his shapeshifting ability, and he never really wants to advertise it or do it very much. And we certainly know he doesn't like to revert to his, basic state in front of anyone. But if the idea is that he is now feeling more confident and free and, not shamed about being a changeling,
Yeah.
and he has a private space to practice, that makes sense. And so I like that
Yeah.
the character is growing in that way.
I liked that they took his bucket and put Kira's plant in it. because
Yes,
I was like, what a great
it's
symbol for
definitive.
literal growth is that
Yeah.
he's got a plant growing in this thing that he no longer has to revert into.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love that. I was like, that is it. I mean, it was definitely on the nose symbolism, but I felt it was completely appropriate.
Yeah, and
Nothing
Kira
better
was
than
so
to take
happy
this thing.
for him, and she's happy that
Right.
he puts the plant in. She just wants to
Yeah,
see it. She's his friend. Yeah, it was a nice
absolutely.
scene between them.
And I think it's pretty significant too that, like the person that he's opened up to the most is Kira, you
Right.
know, and it's just kind of playing into this thing. There's obviously something else going on here. He feels obviously more comfortable telling her things than he does anybody else. So not that
Right.
uh, just seems like those two obviously have something here. So I like seeing that development furthering along as well.
Right.
Um, I also liked how quick Odo was to jump to the defense of the Jem'Hadar once they realized he was a Jem'Hadar, and he was like, "Yeah, you guys want to send him off to Starfleet where he can be studied like a specimen." And they're like,
Right.
"Oh, but he'll be treated so well." And he's like, "Okay, he'll be a
Right.
well treated specimen because he knows what that's
Right.
like to be in a
Yes.
place, an institution where you're poked and prodded and
And
studied because you're
cataloged. Yeah.
right." You're the unknown alien. You're the only one of your kind in the
Right.
area. And he's trying his best to not um, let this kid really fall to the same fate.
Right.
And
And we
it,
have
it
backup for that because in the season
yeah,
2 episode where they he gets turned kind of
into that,
crazy at times, and he
yeah,
goes, the scientist who studied him is on the station, and that's
Dr.
exactly what
Moore.
happens. Is Dr. Mora is very nice and friendly, but he keeps treating Odo like a specimen the whole time. He
Mhm.
keeps making comments every time Odo does something, like he's observing him, and it's unnerving. It shows that he's not really accepting, at least until the end of the episode where he acknowledges that he's been doing it. He doesn't really accept Odo as a person on some level, or at the very
Right.
least, he's treating him as like a child at best, not as a fully formed adult, quote unquote,
Yes.
person. Um, yeah,
Yes. Dr. Mora Pole. He's the one who, kind of discovered Odo, and that was their whole process. Being in Odo was in his lab, and he experimented on him. He didn't know what Odo was. He
right,
experimented on him, and then it even is kind of made apparent that even after it was proven that Odo was at least sentient, even though they still didn't know what he was, but it's sentient, he was still something of a curiosity that was experimented on and so forth. And
right,
Odo obviously, he was traumatized by that. He really hates that. And so he's now seeing the parallels, the potential parallel anyway, of this happening to this young Jemadar here. And he's trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, the issue that we have, of course, is that the Jem'Hadar are bred by the founders to be the perfect fighting machine. And it's not even a matter of like social conditioning or anything like that. They are literally bred for that purpose. They are
right,
bred to be perfect soldiers who are obedient to the founders. And
right,
even Cisco, not Cisco, but Bashir, when he's doing his diagnostics, he's like, he's missing a vital enzyme. He's basically suffering from like a drug
addiction.
addiction, like
Yeah,
like withdrawal.
yeah,
And he's like, the only thing I can think of that would be a reason someone would intentionally design a species with this obvious flaw is control.
right,
So they're putting the pieces together that, yeah, this is all genetic engineering on a scale that has never been encountered before, and it's all to make them hyper aggressive. And we see that it plays out beautifully, perfectly, because here's this kid who went from infant to teenager in the course of a few days, and now
right,
he's wielding weapons, and apparently he has some kind of genetic training, something or whatever, because he is able to walk, talk, and fight
right.
fairly quickly. So there must
Yes,
be some kind of genetic knowledge that's ingrained in him, and that's clear. That's also indicated as well with Odo because he reveres Odo on
right.
sight.
Yes,
So yeah, there seems to be some kind of genetic conditioning here for this. So yeah, they have every reason to be apprehensive, and I think Odo was definitely kind of blind to the uphill battle he was having to fight in trying to change all of that genetic conditioning to get
Right.
this guy to be like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can be more than just cannon fodder for the Dominion.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah. It
that
was
was just a very interesting bit.
Yeah, and I have to say that the part when Kira comes to him and like berates him and like reminds him that he's a Jim Hadar was the worst scene in this episode. I was really unhappy with that scene because we just had Kira and Odo like bonding, and then here comes Kira and she's like, "Hey Odo, remember that he's a Jim Hadar," and she's like mad at him, and it's
Yeah,
like, what are you
it also
doing?
it also seems a bit tone deaf considering the episode that we just watched with Kira, in which she kind of has her own little redeeming moment with Tekeni Gamor,
That's true. Yeah.
revealing that she was of that opinion that all Cardassians were murderers, and yet by the end of the episode, she is telling Tekeni how much of an honorable man she thinks he is. And so then
Right.
for her in the very next episode to follow it up and say, you're dealing with a Jem'Hadar. He's bred to war. He can't change. He's dangerous. For her
Right.
to be saying those things, it flies in the face of the development we just saw her go through in the
Right.
last episode.
And she doesn't come to Odo as a friend in that moment. She comes to berate him, or at least it felt
Mhm.
like berating to me. She doesn't come to him and just be like, "Hey, Odo, I'm really concerned. I know your story and what you're concerned. I know your concerns, but I'm really concerned that maybe your judgment is being clouded, and so how are things going?" She doesn't ask him any questions. She doesn't ask, "Do you sense that he can be reformed or that he is more than we are fearing?" She just tells him, "Don't forget." And I just
Right.
felt like that scene was it was a I don't know if insult's the right word, but just it brought Kira as a character down for me
Yeah.
in that moment. And so in the end of the episode, when Odo shows up and says you were right, well, I feel like again we've said it so many times, this could have been another great 2-part episode. I would have loved to see the Odo and Jim Hadar boy in the Gamma Quadrant episode. What is
Yeah.
going on there? Why does he come back and say that she was right? Did something else happen in the meantime that we don't
Yeah.
see? Yeah,
It makes
yeah,
me wonder if there were some things that were left on the cutting room floor when they were doing the editing for this, because even that scene where Kira comes to confront Odo, it almost seems like it doesn't fit with what else was going on before it, and then
right,
immediately following, almost like it was just kind of stuck in there. And then, yeah, even at the end, it's just like it feels like a conversation or two is missing that would have really helped to tie a lot of that story together. So yeah, we've said it before. Yet another episode that could have made a great two-parter, but also one that could have probably benefited from just being maybe 10 to 15 minutes longer, just to give
right,
us a couple of more interactions and some key points. Like, and not just with this story, like even with Cisco and Marta and Jake, that could have also used a scene or two more of them, talking or interacting,
right,
to help kind of smooth it out and give us a more complete episode.
right,
But yeah, I would have loved to see more of that, and I would love to see more of each of these interactions. If
right,
maybe they sent the Jem'Hadar off not to um, the Federation starbase somewhere, but maybe send him to Bajor. I mean, I don't, you know, because at the time, like there's no Dominion presence on Bajor. They apparently
right,
have their own scientific facilities. Mora Pol is working at one that we know of anyway. So maybe keeping him relatively close by, and then having Odo have to kind of do this back and forth every so often to do this
right,
development before it ultimately falls apart or not, would
right.
have been another great way to explore these aspects too, and also show us how deeply interested Odo is in finding out if there is something redeemable about his people or not. Because
Right,
that seems to be where he's at right now. Knowing that they
right,
are the controlling force around the Dominion seems to be very disheartening and troubling for him.
right.
So it seems like he's intent on finding some kind of redeeming value, and we need more avenues for him to do that.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, it really does help the character of Odo to have these conflicts going on. I feel like there's an episode that gave us a lot of insight into Odo, and again, I just wish there was more chance to really flesh that out. Again, Kira I wish she had been a better partner to Odo and a better
Yeah.
friend to Odo in that, as opposed to just saying what we already knew. Well, you know
Yeah.
he's dangerous. That's the question that's being asked right now. I mean, when she gets Odo, it's because he's in the middle of training. I mean, that could have been a great moment where she says to him, like, "What do you think? How's it going?" And he's like, "Well, he is like destroying the training session. Like, this kid is like at an inherent level talented at this stuff. So I'm not even sure the Federation could handle him. Something like that. Like, it
Yeah.
really would be better for him. And actually, we forgot to talk about it. The boy says in talking with Odo when they're running to the ship to try and kind of escape that like he wants to go be with the Jem'Hadar. He knows what he is, who he is, what he wants. Because like Odo asks him like, "What do you want? Like, tell me what you want." In that like psychiatrist type of way. And the kid like knows what he wants to be. He knows who he is, what he wants to do. He doesn't have questions about his existence. He doesn't have any metaphysical crises. He's like, this is what I am. This is what I do. I want to kill. I want to fight.
Yeah.
Um,
Once
yeah.
once he fully discovered what he was, especially watching those videos that Odo showed him, that really
Yeah.
seemed to
Oh,
kind
that's
of like
right.
switch that on for him, that's what he
Yes.
wanted. So
Right.
yeah, I definitely get that too, and like that desire for him to suddenly want to be with his people, and now Odo definitely being at a crossroads of trying to figure out a way to redirect that kind of not just aggressiveness, but also that eagerness to
Right.
be more into that.
Right.
This is not the first time that we've seen this kind of motif tackled um, by Star Trek. They've done it a couple of different times. In Next Generation, they did it with the Borg, Hugh. When Hugh was discovered on that planet,
Right.
and and ultimately ends up befriending Geordi, and Picard is torn between using him as kind of a Trojan horse in a way to fully cripple the Borg versus
Right.
the realization of he is
An
different.
individual.
He's an individual, right? He's
Which actually
changed.
does turn out to be the crisis, the virus that the Borg need to disintegrate, or
Right,
at least
right. So
some of them.
they end up achieving their goal, but in a more roundabout manner by allowing
And humane.
Hugh to stay. Right.
Yeah.
And then Voyager did the same thing also with the Borg when there was a drone that was created accidentally, and this drone was so wholly different from the others, and then he became a threat to Voyager because he was so different, and the Borg were after him for that difference. And that he kind of started out the same way that Shem'Hadar does. He's wholly ignorant of the Borg. He knows that he is a Borg, but he has no previous knowledge of the
Right.
Borg. And then once he learns about them, he's enticed. He wants to go and join the collective. And it's not until really kind of at the tail end moment that he realizes that he's different and that he has bonded more with the crew of Voyager than with the actual Borg collective, and that he knows he's a threat and a danger, and he ends up sacrificing himself to eliminate the danger to Voyager.
Interesting.
So, so yeah, it's again something that Star Trek has played with a couple of different times. This is the first time though that we see it, and we see that the whole redemption arc of the character fails. Like with Hugh, there was some success in redeeming him and making him aware of his individuality. With the Borg on Voyager, kind of the same deal, only he sacrifices himself to save the rest of them. Here, Odo wholly fails. He does
Yeah.
not convince him at all that he's in any way equal to the others. He fully is committed to his superiority and their inferiority, and he wants to go back and
Okay.
join the rest of the Jem'Hadar. So yeah, he fails in this instance.
Right.
So our heroes fail, which I actually enjoy. The fact I don't
Yes.
want them to have
Yeah.
success every time.
Right.
He fails here.
Exactly.
It's great.
Right. And he doesn't fail because he was. Actually, that's why I think I was also frustrated by him saying to Kira that she was right. I don't feel like it was a black and white right or wrong issue. I feel like yes, the boy wanted something and he was a danger, and so the best thing to give the boy was what he wanted in this case, going back to the Gamma Quadrant. But it doesn't necessarily mean that Odo couldn't, if given more of a chance, have produced what he wanted, the effect that he
True.
wanted. So
That's true.
he didn't fail in the he was totally utterly wrong and he's a failure type of like. But no, he wanted to make Odo wanted to make a hard decision. He wanted to commit to a hard choice and work on something, and things just didn't work out the way he wanted. but it doesn't necessarily mean that he was wrong per se. And
Or
yeah,
that he was wrong to try.
exactly, that's it. Yeah, he wasn't wrong to try. And
Which is kind of what Kira, that's kind of where Kira was going. I feel like with her message to him,
yeah,
that he's wrong to even try. Because even she says in the
right,
beginning when they're in the wardroom and they're discussing, at this point they were just discussing it. She
right,
even is like, "Yes, send him to Starfleet. The sooner he's off the station, the better." She was
right,
ready right then to get rid of him. She's
right,
really the only one that's ready to get rid of him. The others are kind of like, riding the fence a little bit, but she's the only one who's like, "Yeah, just toss him. I'm ready." So
right.
yeah, I could see that as well.
Yeah. Um, oh, I feel like we hit everything. Is
Yeah.
that everything is talk about the episode?
Well,
I
I
mean,
do.
everything
I
else.
do feel like that's it for the episode. The only other thing I will say is that I did want to briefly touch on the fact that once again we get to see Cisco employing his favorite tactic, which is blackmail. Um, he blackmails Jake basically because he invites Marta to dinner in the first place, and Jake's like, "I can't believe that you would invite her behind my back," and he's like, "I didn't invite her behind your back. I told you that if
So-
you didn't, I would."
oh, you did
and
say
and,
that.
they-
That's right.
and it's absolutely true. Back in season 2, when Jake had first started talking about Marta, he was like, "I want to meet her," and
Right.
he's like, "Not yet, but soon." He's like, "Okay, you said soon. I'm gonna hold you to that." So I mean, it's just I love it's a little bit of dialogue, which again shows the consistency of Ben Cisco. The man is
You're right.
not above blackmailing even his own family, and I love it.
Talk about
I love it.
blackmail per se, but I know what you mean. Doing some leverage, working some leverage over on even his
Yeah.
own family.
Yes, the man is. That's his tool. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. So,
Yeah.
but overall, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I think Odo really comes out great here. Cisco shines here. Um, Marta, I still have some questions about, but okay, well, we can move forward. I mean, the episode doesn't make me walk away going, "Oh, she was terrible," and like I like her more by the end of the episode than I did at the beginning, but I still have questions. I guess I'd say. I do
Okay.
feel like the Kira Odo relationship was great at first, and then hit some sort of weird rough patch there, as we've talked about. But otherwise, oh, and I also, if you go into the Gamma Quadrant, the Jim Hadar had said that we're gonna in the Changelings had said we're not gonna let you come through anymore, and yet the freighter chick and Odo with the Jim Hadar boy end up going through to like return him at very least. So, what is our relationship with the Jim Hadar and the founders like?
Yeah, I
Is it
mean, there
more?
seems we don't really. That's a good question. I mean, the even Quark kind of intimates with the Boslick captain when she says she's going to the Gamma. He's surprised. He's like, "You're still going to the Gamma Quadrant?" So it kind of seems like a lot of ships, a lot of species from the Alpha Quadrant have decided to give the wormhole a wide berth. The only people that seem to be going through the wormhole right now are most likely military personnel, Starfleet, maybe
Right.
some Klingon ships, whatever. But that's about it. Unless you're like ready for the combat that could happen on the other side of it, you're not going.
Right.
I think Odo kind of, he gets a pass here because they weren't going to kill him. Like once the ship is scanned and they realize that Odo's on board, they're not going to kill him. And then
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course,
Well, that's definitely true.
yeah,
I totally agree. But it still does ask the question, like when they find out that the Jim Hadar boy was in the Alpha Quadrant, they're gonna have questions. How did he get there? Oh, it was this
well,
freighter, and then that's all kinds
yeah,
of questions have been asked, but we don't get them. We don't see them asked it.
no,
We don't see the answers. So
no,
yeah,
not at all. But we'll see. We'll see what happens here soon. This season 3 is a great season, and it's a great lead up to some of the best parts of Deep Space Nine and seasons 4 and beyond. So we are getting there.
right.
But I think that's it for us tonight.
All
Now,
right. First live stream. Woo!
yes. Now, before we completely wrap up, I do want to say, of course, if you haven't already watched it, you should watch the most recent episode of the Lower Decks because it is the first return to Deep Space Nine in 23 years. When yes, it is the cartoon show and all that stuff, but we have not seen anything of Deep Space Nine on screen in any form in 23 years. So if you are in any way nostalgic, you should watch it. And note that it does pick up a couple of years after Deep Space Nine let off. I think it's like 5 or 10 years after. I think it's actually 5 years after Deep Space Nine ended
Hmm.
uh, in the show canon. Okay,
Right.
so be prepared for that. There are some great old faces that pop up when you watch it. But yeah, there you go. Also, if you would like to join David and I, as we said earlier on in the episode, we will be reading the Expanse series, and we are, of course, starting with the first book, Leviathan Wakes. I have my copy, of course, which I've shown off already. David has ordered his, and it should be there tomorrow, I think you
Tuesday.
said. Tuesday. So we'll be talking about that going forward. We'll be incorporating that also into our show. I'm not going to do every single chapter or anything like that, but we'll just do like kind of a
No.
check-in or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
just to kind of
How
go
does it
from
compare to
there.
the show kind of
Right.
thing? Yeah.
Now, unless something happens and we both are just like we have to talk about this particular thing, then of course we will because it's our show and we can do that. But yeah, you can look forward to that. But
Molecule.
anyway, as we say every week, you can find us and follow us anywhere that you do your social medias. That's Facebook, Twitter, and now, of course, YouTube, our YouTube channel. And everything will be called The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. And if you don't want to follow us for the live broadcast or the YouTube content that we put up there, you can, of course, still listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. David, you said you're on Apple,
Apple.
right? All right. Well, that's going to be it for our first ever live broadcast of the Fire Caves. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.